All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Triple S League, our live stream review of episode 1 of Star Trek Picard. Welcome everybody who is tuning in live. Already got some comments in the chat. We will we'll address a lot of those, as many of them as we can throughout our it's not a podcast, but throughout our live stream here today. But we're going to sort of be going through the entirety of episode 1, Remembrance, talking about all kinds of different aspects of it and giving our reviews and impressions. So you're welcome to share yours as well. I'm here as always with Cybsidian. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Now, if you were listening to our podcast on Saturday, you'll know we both have a relatively positive opinion of the show so far, based on the first episode. Now, of course, that's not a universally shared opinion. You may agree, you may disagree. Of course, you're welcome to. But we're both heavy Star Trek Next Generation fans and Star Trek fans in general. But we both really enjoyed this show.
I'm far more of a Deep Space and Voyager fan than I am of the Next Generation fan. I think there's like one or two of the seasons are like really really good, but there's still some things that I dislike about Next Generation. But Star Trek overall is like, I like this world, I like this universe. It's not my favorite sci-fi, but it's definitely one where I think there's like some good stuff in it.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's not perfect. I've enjoyed Voyager. I never really got into Deep Space Nine as much, but
Which is a shame because the payoff from like 4 or 5 seasons leading up to In the Pale Moonlight is like all this time, and you can even say that it was being led up to it with several seasons of Next Generation too. But that moment where it kind of stepped out and showed the stuff, and this is a turning point that's affected the future of the show and the series all the way up until basically they've done this now with Picard. Like I can see the reverberations of it in the thing, and I'm actually like generally I'm kind of a fan of this because I think it needed to be done because there's some major holes and problems with the Federation in general, and I had been seeing it for a long time, and it's finally like seems to be coming to fruition.
Right, and definitely this show's going to deal with a lot of those issues. So, all right, let's jump into it here. So, join us in our simulated theater as we go through some of the stills from the show and talk about various aspects. We'll relate it to Star Trek lore as much as we can. Already got some opinions in the chat. Shua82W says, a decent sci-fi show, a lackluster Star Trek show. And Manny Calavera says it's complete crap. So definitely some difference of opinion.
Manny, I have to agree with Manny. Alex Kurtzman has really dropped the ball on, like, definitely the Discovery show.
Alex Kurtzman, yes, was a showrunner on Star Trek Discovery, or is. Is
and he's sort of he's still the showrunner of Picard as well.
Right.
However, he's not as involved as he has been in other projects. So that's the first thing to remember. Like he's going to take the credit for this, but he ended up giving up most of his direct control to a lot of the writers and a lot of the other producers. And I mean, we could do like 4 hours of talking about what's going on with Alex Kurtzman and the whole series in general. And it's about as good as and my opinion of him is about as valid as my opinion of Kathleen Kennedy over running the Star Wars one. It's like the only Star Wars projects that are good right now is the stuff that she has little to no control over. If she's in the room in the planning stage for anything, you can guarantee that the lore is going to be thrown out, is going to be trashed on, and is going to be ignored. And whatever criticism comes because of like, hey, you didn't do a very good job with this, suddenly you're labeled as somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about and whose opinions should be completely ignored. And for this, Manny, you know, I have to agree with you. It really, really, really does cause issues, and you end up having a lot of problems with the story and a lot of problems with the lore, and all that. And 100% agree. And I think people who have um, a, 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 a history, and Alex Kurtzman does, he has a history of saying in interviews and writing and stuff like this that he's not even a fan of the show, just in general. He's not a fan of Star Trek. There's one interview that was quoted, and I don't know if it was how accurate it was, but there was a question as to whether he even watched the original shows, especially when he was doing Discovery, because you wouldn't be able to tell that from like the science and all that stuff, like the fact that Spock has a sister that nobody's ever heard of before, the fact that there's replicators in a time where there wasn't replicators, and it's like it's just like Star Trek, the Federation got replicator technology. Um, I think it was from no, I think I'm thinking hollow gems. Although maybe it was replicators, um, but they got some of their technology from the Ferengi, and they ended up like implementing more of it, and it was an interesting like story because I was reading a whole bunch of extra lore on it. But none of this stuff matters to people who come in and walk in and try to you know, try to take over when they don't even like the series. And all Kurtzman has been doing and what he's been trying to aim for apparently for a few years is to just have a big controlling like genre so that he could just get so he can launch his career higher and higher. And he begrudgingly walked in and took Star Trek, and the first season of Discovery was just it was just awful. Like it was really, really awful. And then they're like, well, we need to fix it by bringing in uh, another captain. It's like, what's that going to do? And then he was tied to the whole like stealing plot and lore from another sci-fi show, or sorry, it's sci-fi. It's like a game slash writing. Um, this is this one dude. He just walked in and stole the whole plot line with the tardigrades and all this stuff and the characters, and it's like he didn't lift a general idea or two. He stole the whole thing and then based it all around that, with the writer. And he there's a fair amount of evidence, allegedly, that he knew about it too. And so there's a lot of alleged problems with it. So let's so with those problems out of the way, um, we can look at what has been the other problems that have been mentioned. And so we'll kind of go through it a little bit as we kind of go through the series. But people are like, oh, the Federation's not in a good place right now. And to that I say, well, yeah, it's not in a good place because they just it wasn't that long ago that they were nearly destroyed by another force. And as far as Roddenberry's vision of the future, Roddenberry's vision of the future was always flawed and inaccurate. Um, if there's other aliens out there that are as powerful as you, then your idea of like building a utopia is never going to work. And what we saw with the Federation, and we especially saw it in the Next Generation, was that they had created a golden basket of worlds that had was kind of more or less a utopia. Nobody had to do anything, and the outlying colonies were dying or were being attacked or were being bullied or were suffering. And like, sure, the Federation cared and tried to do everything that they could, but it's like there's a fair amount of problems that were never addressed. And this is what led to the Cardassian, peace treaty, and what led to them abandoning colonies and giving up on people. Um, and then that curtailed ultimately into the Cardassians joining the Dominion because they were kind of pushed into a corner. It led to the creation of the Maquis. It led to the internal strife that you had with everything. That had always been the direction from basically day one, from the Dominion, or sorry, from the starting with the whole Cardassian War into the Dominion. Like, it was just an internal fault with their system. And I've got to say that there's certain aspects of the Prime Directive that are absolute garbage. Like, that A, make no sense, B, are absolute garbage. Now, some of it does, make some sense, but we can see that the only reason why the Federation survived at all is because there were shadowy organizations and people willing to violate the Prime Directive whenever their survival was at stake. So whenever the survival was at stake, they would, find some reason to go, well, the Prime Directive, blah blah blah, and it's like, it's it seemed stupid to me that they had put themselves into the corner until you realize that this is actually what came down to the war, and what has put them on this path. And now we find a federation that's been withdrawn, and that would have happened in any in any like major civilization that hit a war, and that their sprawl had just become too big. And you could have gone the way that the video game did, the Star Trek MMO, where it's like, they're expanding, but the thing that fueled the expansion there in that story was war, and like, and absorbing other like entities. So the setting for the show, to me, it makes sense, and to me, it's not necessarily a creation of like trying to horseshoe this kind of theory in it. This, I don't really feel that, and I don't really sense that, generally speaking.
I think, and
Not in the first episode. It's not horseshoed in. It's a natural progression of the timeline.
the thing about a utopia is a utopia, in terms of storytelling, is very boring. But also,
Extremely boring.
you can ask the question, like, because it seems like humanity had developed to this utopic future. Scarcity is no longer an issue. They can replicate whatever they need with, matter replicators, food replicators, that kind of thing. There's this whole idea that they have no money. They're driven by just the desire to explore and advance and all of this, which is good. But then you look on a larger scale, the utopia is constantly fractured in the show, even in the original Next Generation series. Picard himself violates the Prime Directive a whole bunch of times. He disobeys orders from his superior officers when he believes, those orders to be immoral. And, there's a variety of other things that just illustrate that that this utopia is still imperfect. Like, there's even an episode where they deal with, the primal urge of being violent with, a particular officer. I don't remember the ins and outs of the plot line, but this seems to be a continual theme. Like, this utopia needs constant maintenance, and so I tend to agree with you, Saib, on the fact that this is kind of a natural way for Starfleet to go. And Starfleet, it's also important to keep in mind, Starfleet and the Federation are two separate. They're connected, but they're two separate things. Like, Starfleet is Earth's space force, basically, right? Their fleet of ships that goes out. But that's not the entirety of the Federation. The Federation is the union of all these planets.
Yeah, but I mean that, like, they, like, with the Andorians and with the Vulcans, like, they don't really have that. Like, they do have, like, their own ships, but their main defensive force, I mean, Beta Z and all that stuff, their main defense force is the Federation. They don't have an actual. Most of these planets don't even have a self-defense force of any kind, and quick, very quick sidebar over to the new movie series. I always found that this one single ship, despite its advanced technology, could just walk in and destroy Vulcan was absolutely moronic in every conceivable way, because how you'd have a home planet that doesn't have an enormous amount of defenses for a logical being, like for logical creatures, like the fact that you don't have just like 40 or 50 massive planetary guns just trained on this thing as soon as it enters orbit is just absolutely mind-bogglingly stupid.
Well, I mean,
And
the
I always found
if we're
faults in that.
if we're talking
I,
about J.J.
I
Abrams
know.
Star Trek,
Quick,
it's
quick
different.
sidebar. But taking that back to the series, it's like this is part of the issues that I have. Is like it seems that not very many of these planets have planetary defenses, even though we know that they do, because it's talked about a lot in the shows. And in the case of the Betazoid or Betazed, they just they had significantly, they had antiquated defense systems. And that's part of the problem with the utopia is as soon as you have a utopia where nobody thinks of combat or war, you're going to have antiquated defenses. And the first like single ship that has the capability of like coming in and knocking out your entire civilization, um that is now suddenly like a massive deal. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh
you
wow.
yeah you can get accustomed to everything going well, and then maybe you're not
Hmm.
prepared when things start to go badly. Anyway, I mean, let's we'll move on to start talking about the specific ins and outs of the episode. Now, so
Yeah.
there's obviously a lot of disagreement about this, as far as how well this fits into Star Trek overall. Personally, I don't have an issue with the direction they've gone here. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if my opinion on that changes by the end of the season. I mean,
Hmm.
more info
Yes.
might be revealed to explain sort of what's going on. We still have a lot of unanswered questions as far as why things went down the way they did. But speaking specifically of the quality of the show itself, I do agree with the one comment earlier. N7 Myths said the dialogue was really bad at times. The plot did have some conveniences and things that I didn't like. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the show. I yeah, it was a little clunky at certain points, and it felt like they rushed a few things to fit a lot into that first episode,
Hmm.
while still keeping the dramatic tension. And we'll go through some of those plot points here. This is a if you're looking at the screen right now, we are going to have some stills from the episode coming up, and this is of course from the opening scene of the episode, which I absolutely love, where Picard is playing poker with Data, and they have that conversation about Data having a tell, and how his tell is that he has no tell, and it's really interesting because Data is employing this deception, and then he gets confused about which deception to use. I just thought it was a great opening scene.
Yeah, classic
I wish you had
classic Data,
grabbed
really.
that shot of the Enterprise D sweeping in. It was a really cool shot with the music, of course. The Blue Skies song, no, nothing but blue skies. I don't know what it's actually called, but it's the song that Commander Data sang at Riker and Troy's wedding.
Hmm.
So nice callback there. You get this sweeping shot with it zooming in to 10 forward on the starship, and then there's this poker scene, and nobody else is around. And Picard says, I don't want the game to end because, it becomes clear that he's having a dream, a little bit later on here. But anyway, here's a shot of Data. Of course, Tyler Lalonde says, wasn't Data's tell that he doesn't raise? Unless if you're talking about something from previous lore that I'm not aware of, maybe. In this case, it was that Data dilates his left pupil to try and fool Picard into thinking that he's bluffing. But Picard notices this, and he knows that Data can't actually have like a natural tell, and so he knows Data's bluffing when Data doesn't dilate his pupil. It's yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I don't know how that would actually work logistically, but yeah, that
Also,
was the tell.
something that I think the show is important to point out is that not everything, like things that happened in the first like episode or first season or two of the Next Generation are obviously not the current status quo of the future. Like how Data would play, you know, games. Obviously, at some point, Data would have had to have learned that he needed to learn how to raise. It's something that's kind of like, he progressed and he was learning as he went.
Yeah, if
And
it
while
was
that
early
was
on, yeah,
while that was something that happened, within the series, at some point he would have evolved. Even though this isn't actually Data, it's just a dream.
right. First season of Next Generation was pretty rough. If you
Hmm.
go back and watch it, it's pretty rough. But the show gets really really good after that. All right, so Brent Spiner looking a little old. He actually looks pretty good in this shot, but when they do the close-ups of him, he's got sort of the sagging jowls of an older man, which he definitely is. It was the de aging they did with him was pretty good, but there's still a few tells that yeah he's definitely getting old. So end of the hand, he lays down 5 Queen of Hearts, which obviously starts to tell you the viewer and tell Picard that something's off and he's not, this isn't real, whatever's going on here. And then they notice, oh, we're at Mars, and Mars explodes. Basically, the ship explodes, and then Picard wakes up. So this of course ties into what's revealed later on in the episode. And Picard wakes up at Chateau Picard, France. It's a beautiful place.
It's the same. It's a very good scene in that it's very similar to what they had filmed originally.
In
With
the final episode of
Yeah,
TNG, yeah, where he,
it looked very very similar, and so that was kind of like, good job.
yeah, the only real difference was Picard had a beard in that one.
Yeah, and now for those of you pointing it out, yes, that is California, and yes, that was a shot from 2018 2019 whenever it was filmed. It's like, yeah, no, we know that's California. You can even find the exact place. It's kind of like,
Here's what
yeah.
I don't want to get too far down this rabbit trail, but I I find myself wondering, how does Picard own a vineyard and employ all these people if there's no money in this society? Like,
I think these people just live with him because they respect him and they wanted to care for him.
like
And I think that the concept of like property is still something that's kind of there. I mean, again, the systems of like how utopias work is completely like, I mean,
I don't.
it's really foreign because it's like, yes, this is my property. I thought this was a utopia. It is. This is my store. This is my shop. This is my restaurant. The Yeah, you encountered a lot of this like concepts of ownership, like how that factors into a utopia. I don't really like. They never quite explain it because it's not something that you can explain. And yeah,
So here's a shot of
so
Boston.
yeah,
Looks
and
really
and I
cool.
do like, yeah, I do like that they show that part of the city is still like the old version, but then there's new buildings and
Yeah.
and whatnot in it too.
N7 Myth says it's such a utopia that everyone has their own ranch. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Or vineyard, as the case may be.
Um, Now, I was just watching some Voyager yesterday, like prepping myself up for some of this, and just kind of going over some stuff. And I encountered yet another thing that drives me absolutely mental, with Dahj and this next scene here with her and her boyfriend. They're in their loft or whatever you want to call it, a little apartment building, and they're starting to like celebrate and have some fun and stuff, and I didn't take a picture of the particular scene where he gets taken out with a knife to the stomach. Um, it must have been a really powerful knife to the stomach. I don't know very many people who are killed instantly by a knife to the stomach.
I thought it was
Unless,
his chest. I'd have to watch it again, but I thought it
sorry, yeah, yeah, it
I
was
thought it got hit in the
his
heart.
like sort of heart, sort of chest. But unless it's where his brain is in Star Trek, I just watched an episode of Harry Kim getting killed and then them bringing him back after several minutes, and how he talks to how about how medical technology has come a long way, and we're able to revive people from people who've been dead for minutes and sometimes even longer. And I mean, even in today's world, if you stop a heart, you can get them back within 5 minutes. But apparently, what's been like a minute and a half or less. Uh, apparently, there's no like you'd think that like call 911. Somebody's
Hmm.
been stabbed in the chest. Oh, we'll teleport, we'll beam that person to the emergency room where doctors will immediately begin resuscitating them. There's none of that. And I I know it was super nitpicky, and it's one of those nitpicky moments of the show where it's like, okay, all right.
Maybe that all happened after the cameras cut away.
Yeah. The other thing that was kind of weird is that the dude spoke Romulan. And then the other dude's like, speak in English. And
Well,
it's like,
I feel like
I
that
thought
was
universal translators were at play here, but I guess not in this particular scene. Maybe they're just not wearing them, right?
not
Maybe,
wearing them, or
maybe,
those things are maybe equipped on the starship. I never quite
yeah.
understood how those worked, but
Yeah, I never understood, like, I always understood how somebody, like, obviously universal translators in everybody's ear really helps to, like, work out things. I never did understand how, like, the lip syncing would have worked. And I also never understood how people who weren't equipped with them, you could suddenly like hear and have everything translated immediately. I mean they've poked and referenced this before, and it's one of these things where it's like it's best not to like nitpick about that stuff because it's silly.
well, yeah. I mean,
So,
at some point you do have to suspend disbelief and be like, okay, this is a TV
yeah.
show, but yeah. Anyway, I at first I was confused about why would he tell him to speak in English? What does it matter? But then I realized, oh, they probably don't want to be identified as Romulan. And Seven Myth says, I was more confused about the guys teleporting into her room. You'd think they'd have some prevention for that. Although it is a
Hmm.
utopia, so maybe home invasions aren't a thing.
Yeah, maybe
That's
maybe
altogether
home.
that is possible. I would like to think that they'd have some kind of prevention. I mean you can't beam through the shields on a starship, so like you could put some kind of energy field around or in different regions to
Well,
prevent unauthorized transportations. I don't know.
well, this is where again I feel that things are again it's like with this level of technology, I would imagine that you would have to be stupid to not have a home computer where like, the computer is monitoring your speech, and if you say a code word or if you just if it just reads that you're in peril, that it contacts the police, and then the police beam inside, and suddenly suddenly you have law enforcement there at a snap of a finger. Again, this is some of the issues that I think
I mean,
in a utopia world
it's
they
possible
would.
that the invaders had some way of disrupting that. Like, there's probably
Yes, and
some
that's true.
roundabout explanation that works,
and
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 we
for
don't
that,
get the explanation.
yeah, and for that, I mean, something like this is easy enough to add in when you just have a panning shot of like the home computer security system just being turned off, and like and then her referencing that at some other point in the show. It's just something that would fix a lot of this stuff, because again it's like it's
Or maybe
and this is
she's
again.
just not that smart about home security. Who knows?
Well, again, this is where I think Kurtman doesn't really like follow through with a lot of stuff, because this has been addressed in some other episodes, right? Where like they have security, they have like dealing with theft and that kind of stuff, and apparently, you know, Tuvok and all these other security officers can anticipate most of this stuff in the future, but in the far, far future, most people can't because it's just either it's just not something that happens and nobody thinks that it's a concern, or this is just, you know,
Well, I do
obviously
kind of,
not how.
yeah. I mean, I do kind of
Hmm.
picture people who are living on Earth maybe get a little apathetic about certain
Yeah.
things because life is so good, nothing bad ever happens, so I'm just gonna let my guard down. I mean, that there could be a bit of that playing into it. By the way,
Hmm.
shout out to Last Known Meal. Thank you for the compliment on the layout. Appreciate that. All right. So okay, here's part of the action scene that takes place. So they throw this bag over her head. I mean, real high
Hmm.
tech, right? And the next one's already that image of. Hang on, I'm gonna go back to this one. So they throw a bag over her head, and suddenly, she's struggling and fighting. Then she calms down, and then suddenly she activates and kicks all their butts. Whatever that means. You don't know at that point what that means.
And she
So
doesn't have the flash of Picard until after this scene. No, this scene she
yeah,
like she's literally standing there and she literally like turns on. And again, I do not find this in any way, shape, or form out of logic because they never showed. Well, I mean, they did here or there, and I wish that they had shown like I wish they had shown Data going on like a spree. Now he has gone on sprees before. He's gone on two of them that were like automated, right? One was in the movie, one was in the series where he basically shut down and took over the entire ship just on automation and was able to like just do so much to just like he basically fought against an entire ship of people just by being fast and quick. And then later on, he did the same thing and in one of the movies. And then there's another scene where he like took out uh, a bunch of like people in this little colony that was getting taken over by some other forces, and he basically was able to like just take them all out. What I had always wanted to see was like Data just going on a tear and just destroying everything and everyone around him. That would have been cool, but you got the distinct impression that he was capable of that, right? It's like now, yes, he was made out of deuterium and all this stuff and like super composites, and you don't have Dahj being made of the same necessary material, although we do get an impression that her physiology is a lot stronger and is a lot more dense than or just stronger in general. I don't know if it's more dense or heavy, but she's able to do things that are more advanced. And again, this is not outside the universe of Star Trek. Uh, the augmented people, like people who are genetically augmented, were capable of doing just as much. And so I don't find the scene out of sync at all. This is not a normal human girl. This is a created perfect being that's nearly unstoppable. And I think this is absolutely
yeah.
normal. Yeah. So
Well,
I
this could
had no
definitely.
problem with the scene.
No, I don't either. I mean, she can't see, but we learn later she's got superhuman hearing. She takes these guys out. She's obviously got some training or programming of some sort that
It's programming.
allows her to do this. A discussion we'll probably have later down the road as we learn more in this series is what makes her an android as opposed to a genetically enhanced biological being or human being. That's just something I'll table now because we know she's made of flesh and blood, but she is also created from a fragment of data that was left behind. So we'll have to discuss that a bit later on, probably as we get more information about who she is and what her history is. So then she has this image of Picard that she. When does this actually
This follows after the fight when she's like in the room, she's holding her boyfriend, and she suddenly has this vision of like, you have to go find this person, find this person, find this person, because this person will help you. Um,
Yeah.
Data's not here right now. Data's not there, and oh dear, I've forgotten his name. The her creator, or her supposed creator,
Maddox.
is Maddox. We don't know. The prevailing thought here is that Maddox was the one who created these, but we also don't know if it's not a, like, Maddox might have created them, or Data might have created them as a backup, as like some kind of project that was in, that was like, he never told very many people until he had created his daughter, the first one. He had never told anybody about it until she was basically like online, because, like, for him it's like, well, why do they need to know? So this is this is, I think, a moment in the series that has yet to be, because it's like, this is 20 years, isn't it? I thought it was 20 years difference. I'm
Let me look that up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is 20 years difference. She looks like she's a little older than 20 years old. So this is one of these things. It's like, he obviously had problems with her, with the first daughter. Her positronic net crashed, and we learned that this was an issue that many of the people had, or sorry, the many of the first iterations of Data had, and why apparently, why in this version of the universe, why B4 didn't wasn't able to like turn on, is because he had issues with that as well. So I
It's
wouldn't be surprised if this turns out to like be a project that Data had started in some way, shape, or form, and Maddox maybe carried on, versus like Maddox being the only one who ever created this.
yeah. It's probably some information missing there. By the way, so Picard takes place 18 years after Nemesis.
Yeah,
So 18 years after the death of Commander Data.
yeah. So
And
to
so,
me,
I mean, it's possible though. Like, yeah, she looks older than 20 years old, and especially if
mhm,
she's at the stage of education that she's at. But also, it's possible she was created in adult form.
this is true, and this is some of the mysteries. And I hope that they do it right. Whichever way they end up going, I hope that they actually build up to it and actually like have some of it, because as we'll talk about later in the episode, there's a lot riding on this, and yeah. So we'll talk about that later with Data and Dahj, and the whole thing that's going on there.
Okay. All right. So I'm not sure what's going on in this shot. This is him at his vineyard,
Yeah,
of
so
course,
this is it.
rocking
He
that
he
hat.
gets up, and this is where he says that, you know, and this is where the show really started to get me. And this is where Picard, he's a very old man, and he says, "No, the dreams are lovely. It's waking up that's starting to become the problem." And I have heard old people say this just before they die. It's like, I'm detached from this world now, because everything and everybody I know has moved on. The world's becoming too strange, and the dreams are where I'd rather be. And this is a very powerful moment where the show really stuck with me, and I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm more interested in this now. And the fact that, like, one thing when they first announced that Picard is back, I first thought, okay, so we're gonna have a geriatric like 90-year-old running around with phasers, and like, really, is this what we're gonna get? Or, and I was like, no, he's so old, he's gonna be like on his last legs, and here we have it, and here we actually have it. And so I was like, okay, they're treating this with a fair amount more respect than I assumed that they were going to treat it as. I assumed that they were just going to have CG Picard running around shooting phasers and ducking and weaving and all that, and you don't have that. You have him where he's like the dude's like really really close to death,
Well,
like a
he's
lot.
yeah, they're letting him be old. And in
Yeah.
that action sequence, he's like out of breath, and she's like, "No, we've got to
Mhm.
keep going." And he's having a hard time running up the stairs. But yeah, I agree that is, I mean, it is treating with the character with respect because he is old at this point. He's not a superhero. He's not superhuman. He's he's a respected character, but he is old and he should be enjoying his retirement. But of course, he's got a lot of baggage. He's got a lot of pain. He's got the guilt of some mistakes, and people he's lost and that kind of thing. So yeah, I agree with N7 Myth. It was a fantastic moment. He enjoys dreaming of Data. I saw saw one just stupid take on this. That's like, I think it might have been a joke, but they were like, "Is he having romantic feelings for Data? Like it's like, blah blah blah." They were, he's dreaming of him and he doesn't want to wake up. It's like, have you never had a good friend before? Like a good
And
friend who you would, if something happened to them, they would, it would deeply, profoundly affect you. Even, it doesn't have to be romantic or sexual for it to be like this.
and again, I bring this back to like old people have regrets and have fears and have things that weigh on them. So
Yes, and plus, let's not forget that Data basically gave his life to save Picard. So there's you're gonna live with that. That's gonna stick with you.
yeah.
All right, so now we get to this interview, which he's like, I don't know why I got let myself get talked into this,
Hmm.
and his fears are founded. So this interview starts
Now
off
now
ordinary
this
enough, but then
yeah.
this interviewer gets very hostile, almost
It's all
unnaturally so. I felt.
no, you clearly haven't been paying attention to like current media. This was, everybody was talking about how there's symbolism here of like current times, and I haven't seen anything that really speaks to that until this scene where I was like, oh hey, look, it's a modern CNN journalist where they don't stick to they ask questions that they agreed not to ask. They don't have any journalistic integrity. They're completely oblivious to history and knowledge of like major events, and they just are not educated on anything that's been going on. Oh yeah, and they're just there to do gotcha journalism, and they're really 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 arrogant.
It just seemed odd that they were going for a gotcha thing at this moment for an event that had happened 10 years prior, I believe. And this was the guy
But
who like she went after him for arranging this rescue attempt. I don't know. It something about it felt off. But
yeah, this is to me this is absolutely this this is like yes, to me this is like solid reality because again, I know you don't watch the news nearly as much as I do, but this is like, I mean, we just had this happen to like three major figures in the last week alone
well,
with
sure. Like I
the
get that
same
this
like
kind of thing
gotcha
happens, but
journalism,
it's like,
like after like oh yeah, we're here to talk to you about this, and then and how do you feel about both beating your wife and being a Nazi all at the same time? It's like excuse me, what? And I mean, like I said, this has happened in the last 2 weeks to major figures. So I think I think this really hit the nail on the head as far as like journalism goes, because apparently journalism, this is a perfect reflection of what journalism today is today.
I guess it was
Where
what was weird to me was that she was on the side of it was wrong to help the Romulans as opposed to why didn't you have enough compassion for these people? I guess it
well,
seemed reversed in that way.
and here I have to totally agree with the Federation. I really do. If I was in the Federation shoes, going, "Oh, Romulus' star is blowing up," all right, okay, what are we going to do about it? Well, we can go save them. Every time the Federation has tried to save them, twice in the in Picard's own experience, they set him up to be killed after he helped them. Like
Okay.
they set up a feedback pulse on this one time where they did an energy transfer when oh, I'm forgetting what her name is, the Bajoran girl and the chief
Ensign Rowe?
engineer. Yeah, Ensign Rowe. They got phased out of like physical matter, so they couldn't be seen, and everybody assumed that they died. And they overheard the Romulans had planned a feedback surge that was building so that the minute they went to warp, the ship would explode. It's like that's what they did to somebody who came out of nowhere to help them. So like this, all of the other traps, all of the other things that they do, all of the other stuff at this point, I mean I'm a little bit heartless. You know, sorry, Android, can't help it. But really, to me, like I'm like, okay, you're an idiot if you go help the Romulans. Like you're an idiot.
Okay,
Like
but you again, I'm going to push back on that because you're talking about isolated incidents of the Romulans, of them stepping out to help like a Romulan ship, which is by rights a unit of the Romulan military force, which
and
they're
we know
hostile
that
with.
they're
But when you're
that the
talking about
military.
their sun, the star at the center of their solar system exploding, or going supernova, whatever, and we can, I mean, I don't know how scientifically that makes sense, but anyway, you're talking about their entire civilization being wiped out,
It's not their entire
civilians,
civilization. It's like, yes, it's their home system,
yeah,
and apparently there's still a lot of like confusion on this. Apparently the sun going supernova was consuming other systems, which was feeding the explosion, and this, like, I know that there's a lot of like theory and like people talking about it and science behind it, but and the only way that you could stop it was through the red matter. And like I'm surprised that they didn't mention that this is how Spock died, right? Or to at least in their timeline that this is how Spock died. Like I'm surprised she didn't say, like, we already lost, the senator, or Ambassador Spock, right? We already lost Ambassador Spock to this. Why did we need to lose more people to this? I'm surprised that they didn't actually cover it from that particular perspective and talk about that particular thing. But whatever, leave that as it is. It's a system. They're not, like, they have enough colonies that, I mean, in any system where you have colonies and you have other solar systems, your home system is going to have, like, after a few hundred years of this, unless you're a stupid Neanderthalic race that doesn't understand basic, like, survival abilities, your home system should only have like 10 to 20% of your entire population.
okay, but that
So
can still be a significant amount of people,
yes,
and
that's still a significant amount of people.
the implication or the yeah, it's implied that okay, there was this crisis, they weren't able to get everybody off. The Federation could help, or Starfleet could help, whichever it was, and I don't see why you would be against that. I mean,
I'm against that because the Romulans have dug their own grave, and I am not.
this was not
I
retribution for anything the Romulans had
I
done. This was a
no,
natural
no,
disaster that was affecting people who were potentially completely unrelated to
we
everything the
we
Romulans had done against the Federation.
we don't, like, if you have a extremely hostile group of people who continually attack you, who even when you show up to provide, humanitarian relief, they end up either kidnapping your people, assassinating your leaders, trying to kill people, and this is just an ongoing thing for hundreds of years. And then you finally discover that there's a giant volcano that's coming in and it's going to wipe out their entire people, and it's like, okay, well, we're going to send a whole bunch of ships that are, are basically like, weapons that are manned by small teams so that they can take on hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of people, and then that there's not going to be this theory or this idea that's going to pop into their heads that, hey, we just take over all of these ships, the biggest armada ever assembled, and then use that as a weapon to then turn around and attack you. This is what, if I were the Romulans, going by everything that we know about the Romulans, this gigantic fleet would have arrived, and you'd be sitting there as the leader of the Tal Shiar going, oh, gee, look, they've sent an entire armada fleet to us that we're going to be teleporting onto their ship and outnumbering them hundreds to one. We're just going to take over the fleet and then bring in all of our own military people, and then we're going to fly all those military people into their system and take over a bunch of their worlds.
Well,
or destroy.
How are you going to do that, though, if you haven't had time to
me.
prepare for it? And if these, I'm not saying that the rescue fleet shouldn't.
The Romulans had every conceivable plan planned out, well, stages and stages in advance.
Okay, well, I'm not saying that the rescue fleet shouldn't be prepared. That, okay, this could be risky. We should prepare for contingencies. Be ready to pull out as soon as there's any sign of the Romulans are going to use this to try and screw us. I'm not saying they shouldn't be prepared. I'm not saying they should go in blind and stupid, but definitely that.
And again,
that you would just give them the middle finger when their sun is exploding. No, again, I can't get behind that.
This leads me back to in the pale moonlight, where the Romulans were sitting there waiting for the Federation to basically be destroyed before they hopped into the war. And they were waiting so that they could take over everybody and everything with minimal opposition. And that they were pulled into the war because of some very sinister tactics that were used by the Federation to actually pull them into the war ahead of their schedule. Because they were always going to join the war. They're not stupid. They're not going to let themselves become surrounded by enemies. They had the plan all along to join the war, but they were just waiting for the Federation to be beaten down to the point of death, basically. And this is why you can't trust them. This is why the Federation looked at the situation and said, it's a terrible thing. And, their own prime directive, again, would have told them, well, we can't interfere with their natural evolution. I mean, how many planets were destroyed by natural occurrences where Picard just sat back and watched it happen? I mean, literally, that's the plot of one episode. There's an entire population of pre-warp, an entire pre-warp civilization that's being wiped out by a natural event, and Worf's brother manages to save like 24 of them because he violated the Prime Directive. And basically, Picard was thinking, well, we're just going to have to space them. Like that's his thought there. So I find it hard to believe that the Federation would again turn on their concept, and especially do it at a time where they were still recovering from the war. They were basically on a blade's edge already with like their own survival, and here Picard wanted to hand the largest fleet ever built over to an enemy that has routinely tried to kill them while they have been helping them under humanitarian grounds. So to me, and let's just finish on this topic and move on. To me, that this is why I think I'll let you rebut, but to me, this is why I think the Federation made the right call, because and especially now that we see that the Romulans, and we know this from the video game, we know this from like everything that they've been doing thus far, the Romulans had their backs broken over this event, and they're still out for galactic control and domination. They still want to destroy and genocide thousands of races so that they're the only ones. It's still their primary mindset. I don't see anything worth saving in that. I just don't see anything worth saving in that.
Right,
What's
but
your
it's
rebuttal?
like the my rebuttal would be that it's like the distinction we make between modern, in modern China, the Chinese people versus the Chinese government and their ambitions. And even as I watched the Next Generation series when I was younger, I always got the impression, okay, yes, these guys are jerks, these Romulans are devious, scummy people, but that doesn't like that's that doesn't seem inherent to their species necessarily, because every now and then there are the ones that want peace and want, you know, or who have different ambitions, and you see that here in Picard with his two servants who work on his vineyard, who are Romulan, and they're
Which,
incredibly appreciative of what he did for them.
and we know that Spock had been working for his entire life's purpose, after after a particular point was to reunite the Vulcans and the Romulans, and was to bring peace to the Romulans. And even there, I mean, again, that one episode where Picard and Spock meet, they were trying to kill them both. They were going to kill them both. Not only were they going to kill them both, but they were going to use them as a cover to invade and then genocide most of the most of the Vulcan people. So again, it's just this, like, every opportunity they have ever had, they have tried to kill off anybody who stands in their way. Not just let them go about their merry way, but to their planned, like, genocidal attacks. It's
Yeah.
just inbuilt into them, and I
Well,
think
that's where that's where I disagree. It's not it's not necessarily an inbuilt thing that's just natural to them as a species. It could be a cultural thing. It could be, like, there's any number of ways you could break it down. I mean, I agree that, yeah, the people in charge, the Romulan government, if you will, their empire,
Mhm.
their military, they do have those
I'm gonna
totalitarian and
I'm gonna
destructive.
I'm gonna quote Jacote, because I think this is I think this fits so very well. Jacote tells this story in Scorpion, where there's this dog and the scorpion, and they're on the side of the river, and there's, like, they need to cross the side of the river, and the scorpion says to the dog, or to the wolf, he's like, "We need to get across. Can I ride on you, and you take me to the other side?" And the wolf is like, "Well, okay, but what's going to prevent you from, you're a scorpion. What's going to prevent you from attacking me?" And the scorpion says, "Well, you know, my life is in your hands, because I can't swim." So the wolf's like, "Okay." So the wolf lets the scorpion onto his head, and they're swimming about halfway through, and the scorpion stings him. And he goes, "You fool! Now we're both going to die. Why did you do that?" The scorpion says, "Because I'm a scorpion. It's in my nature."
Well, that's where we disagree here,
Yeah.
and
So
and
I,
and I would
I
say
mean,
that
I
that's
I see it as that's their nature, just as it's the nature of the Borg to
except there are example that you can find examples in
very,
classic Star
very
Trek
few,
that,
very few
but if there's
examples.
any at all, then you can't say it's just built into their nature.
You can say, well, I mean, you could say that those are the outliers, and there's always an outlier.
Well,
So
we got to move on here. Okay, so Picard's doing this news broadcast live, which I also found a little bit. I found that stretched credulity a little bit, that they would broadcast this live. But anyway, and so you have this convenient plot point where Dahj sees him, and she's like, "Oh, that's the dude I saw in my head." And so she goes and seeks him out somehow. We don't know how, but she shows up at his vineyard and is like, "Yeah, I feel like I'm safe with you. I feel like I need to be, I need to be here. For whatever reason, I needed to seek you out." Okay, so this isn't really explained, but then, hopefully that's something that's coming further in the series. Then we have another dream sequence with Data,
Yeah,
and
he's painting a picture.
this was
He's painting
another
a picture,
really
and
great moment in the show.
yeah,
We
he's
got
painting a picture, and Picard comes up, and Data turns and says, "Would you like to finish it?" And he goes, I don't know how. And he goes, "Yes, you do," which reminds him that Data's painted this picture before, and that one of them is in his house, and the one in his house has the face of the person is looking away from the painting, and he remembers that the other one was a different version of it.
now Data
So
looks a lot younger here. Did you notice that
mhm.
in the very first shot? It's almost like they did that opening shot first, and then they did this scene, and they really improved the de-aging tech.
Mhm.
I don't know, but yeah, he looks a lot younger here. This next picture, oh, this is San Francisco.
Mhm.
I was
I
looking for the picture of
picked
the.
this one. I picked this one because I thought it was funny that the Golden Gate Bridge is just a glorified solar
Yeah,
panel
it's just a
now.
giant solar panel on the surface. They don't need it to drive on anymore. They,
I thought I thought that was so funny. It's
yeah,
like they didn't even turn it into a walking path for people at the academy to just take a long stroll over, or like some kind of like historical monument. No, they turned it into a damn solar panel. Um,
huh?
it's like, why turn that into a solar panel when you could just like put up solar panels all over the place? There's this cool little concept for solar panels in the future where where each tree, at the top of each tree, would be one solar panel, like about 2-3 feet in diameter, and it would just grow up with the tree. It's this cool little concept. Um, like that would solve like most of like
Well,
the amount of like energy requirements of like a 9 to 10 billion dollar, sorry, 9 to 10 billion population. If you did that with every tree that could hold that on the planet, if they could hold that on the planet, then that would solve most of you. So it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, whatever. I just took it because it was really funny to me.
and then next, okay, so he's at the Starfleet archives. Picard goes there to find the other version of the painting that he has that was painted by Data, the one that has the face showing. You see some cool stuff in his private archive chamber here, models of the Enterprise and different ships, and he's got, I don't know if it shows up in the picture you have here. Oh yeah, there's a, if you look on the left side of this one, there's a Klingon bat'leth there and a dagger of some kind. I don't know if that's Worf's, or did Picard get one at some point, or did Worf give him his? I don't know. By the way, really hoping for a Worf to make an appearance. Um, and then you have, so you have him going into. Oh yeah, he's also got the Captain Picard Day banner, which was really touching, because
Mm-hmm.
Picard, not a big fan of kids. It was established, so it's really kind of touching that
That he kept
he
that,
kept
right?
that, and it was, it's very
Yeah,
childish looking.
I like that. I like that. The I like the memories that they had in there. I was watching some people, and you can tell right away who's fans and who's not. Like don't want to be rude, but yeah, I immediately was able to like identify real fans and not real fans by people who looked at the room and they said, "What's that ship? What's those two ships on the thing? What are they?" And there's some book open in the background. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's from. Maybe that's some hinting at some story point in the future. It's like, and I'm just like just my head is on my like, again, I don't know if you want to go back to that picture, but I just like face palmed right there. It's like, okay, that book has been in Picard's office for like all of the seasons.
Yeah. No,
The
I like,
ship,
I
the
wouldn't.
ship on the left is the captain's yacht. The ship on the right is a model that, again, he's had that ship on the right. He's had that model in his office, and I believe that's the first ship that he captained.
Right.
So it's and then again, it's like he's got the Batleth in there. That's from a moment with the Klingons. It's like yeah, all of this stuff is from stuff from like the past. And somebody sitting there going, "What's that ship on the left?" And is what I wonder what that book is. It's like, oh, did you never watch? I swear they didn't watch the original. I don't think they did. So yeah, Captain's yacht is actually part of the Enterprise. It actually comes out from the Enterprise. You can actually see it. It's actually like on the older versions you could actually like see it. They never used it, but you could see it. So, anyways, I'm annoyed. I was
Well,
annoyed.
I mean, I wouldn't have been able to identify everything in that room right off the top of my head, but it clearly all had significance. All right, so now we've got
So,
the
anyways,
painting.
so yeah, he identifies the painting. He realizes that Dahj has been like there all along. Now this is and again we fall into this little bit of speculation here. Some people are speculating and saying that that this is Maddox modeling Dahj after the painting that Data did, and other people are saying no, this is like Data had he had Lol, and then Lol passed away, and this was his next plan. This was his next thing. And again, I don't know which is true. Um, yeah, there's some really God, there's some really like frustrating things going on here with this. But anyways, yeah. So this is so we know now that this is his daughter in some way, in some way, shape, or form. We don't know how much Data had involved in this or what had gone on with this. We know that like we don't know. So yeah.
All right. So after this, Dahj she runs away from Picard's vineyard because she decides she's probably putting him in danger. She doesn't want to do that, and then she calls her quote unquote mother, who is clearly not real in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if it's someone just acting as her mother or if it's an AI of some kind. The way the screen glitches at certain times suggests that she's
This
some kind
is
of computer generated thing.
Yes, this is why I chose this particular image because the 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 mom responds to her daughter in kind of like this preset way, almost as if you're like I got the feeling that you're basically talking to Alexa here.
Yeah, I was like,
And
"Hi, honey.
then
How are you, honey? Wait,
then
what?" Yeah, like it was
yeah,
very,
and then
very canned.
and then when she states the thing, then suddenly the image like filters like this and her responses change to you have to find Picard, you have to go with Picard, you have to find Picard, you have to go, and so that's the thing. So yeah, for a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't think that I have a feeling, I don't know, I this might be wild speculation on my part, but I don't think that's her real mom. Like, you don't
Well,
say.
it's obviously
Oh
not because we know she doesn't have, like,
I know, I know, I
yeah,
know. I thought this was obvious to everybody watching. Thank you, Shua. The name of that ship was the Stargazer. Thank you. Yes.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
I remember it was Star something. I couldn't remember.
but yeah, as to where this fake mother came from, we still don't have an explanation on that for sure, of course. But anyway, but she is like, okay, go find Picard, which of course, you had Dahj seeing an image of Picard when she activated and was in danger. So presumably, whoever implanted that picture of Picard into her, and we don't know if that was like deliberately implanted or if it was something residual left over from Data. Considering she saw the old Picard, I lean toward deliberately implanted, but I mean, who knows, right? Presumably, if it was like based on Data's memories, you would see the younger version of Picard there. But
Hmm.
that could also just be an oversight on the show producer's perspective. Who knows? But anyway, so she's got this fake mother. She's obviously fake, and is like, go back to Picard. He can help you. He can protect you. So she does. She uses her super cyborg intelligence to track Picard down to the archives, and she goes to find him there. He's like, how did you find me? And they have this conversation about, him saying, oh, I think I know what you are. I think I know who you are. And, you're very special to me because of this. And she's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't want to put anyone in danger. Then suddenly she hears the Romulans coming. And there's an action scene. This is where we get that great moment of Picard having trouble running up the stairs. She kicks some more butt, but then ultimately perishes in the attack. This is where Picard sees one of the attackers and realizes it's a Romulan. And then him shouting no because she just died.
Yeah, and and I didn't want to show the picture of her dying. So apparently, and we don't know if this has been weaponized. We know that they suffer from it too if it's exposed to air, but he spits up blood or something like that. Again, we don't know if this has been a. We know that the Romulans are big fans of genetic modification and alteration. Just because one Romulan was able to spit blood, that started to melt her and the weapon. And no, she didn't die from the blood spatter on her face like some idiots are saying. She died from the weapon exploding.
Yeah, because some of it got on the weapon and burned into it.
Yeah, and
caused
if
it to
you
explode,
shocker if you start to melt devices that have enormous power packs to cause massive devastating attacks. Shocker that this happened. Again, I found there was this one scene where she was running up and you could actually see a ship flying, like a shuttle flying past. Why the shuttle didn't pick up weapons fire? Again,
well, that's
kind of weird
picture here. Well, I mean, presumably the police came later, but they didn't find any sign of Dahj.
So they didn't. So there's a couple
didn't
things.
Report it anyway.
So yes, again, we have some confusing stuff here that somebody was asking why they didn't just teleport her out of the room. They didn't teleport her out of the room way back in Boston because as an android, she probably has it wouldn't surprise me at all if they had like an internal stealthing or cloaking system that hid them from being monitored, because again, you're dropping these people off on these on Earth where there's tons of surveillance and a little bit of investigating can say this person shouldn't exist here, or that, or maybe she had this cloaking device where again she's not responding to that kind of stuff, or that she escaped. Because I'm not convinced that she's dead, and even if she is dead, I'm not convinced that Dahj is actually gone, because we cover here there's too much she's not there. If she's as strong as Data is, Data could have survived that explosion easily.
That's true, but Data was made of
deuterium, yes,
and stuff, and we find out later she's made of just flesh and blood.
It's flesh and blood, yes, but it's much stronger flesh and blood, I suspect, strongly.
Well, potentially, she's clearly got superhuman abilities.
Yeah, I mean, she jumped 2 stories
right
there in this one particular.
But as far
scene.
as you know, presumably, her boyfriend probably would have figured out something was up. Just saying.
No, I mean, he was an alien. Maybe he just assumes that all human girls are that strong. All human girls.
Well, not the strength factor, but I'm just saying, it's not like she's got. Anyway, Picard later asks, when he's at the Daystrom Institute, he asks, can you make an android out of flesh and blood? That's the part we're getting to here.
But again, I bring up the augments. The augments were capable of doing just as much stuff, and they were, again, completely made out of flesh and blood, and they could survive. I think some of the augments, you had to, in order to, kill them, you had to either vaporize or, take the blast a huge hole through them, or like take out their heart and their head, or destroy their head completely. And that, again, that's just augmented humans. That's not like a human that's designed with like
Yeah.
basically data in mind.
Well,
So,
I agree
again,
that it
there's
is
some big
possible that she
questions
could be
here.
alive still. Yeah. Like, I'm with you there. She could have survived that potentially.
Yeah.
So
So
that's the no picture.
yeah,
So then
and so
he gets brought back home, and there's a recap of sort of what we just talked about. The
yeah,
police came, but there was no sign of
and he's
Dahj.
like, and he at this point he says, I've just been sitting around waiting to die, which again is another like really rough thing for him to say. He gets up and he leaves.
He's got a purpose now. This was his instigating incident. This was his thing that's driving him into this story. So it yeah. So yeah, it was an interesting moment, and he feels like he owes it to Data. He owes it to his friend to figure out what's going on with Dahj, or what happened. He thinks at this point she's dead, and I mean she might be. We don't know about the other one until the end of this part. The at the Daystrom Institute with Alison Pill here. I can't remember her character's name, but she works at this largely defunded and abandoned cybernetics robotics
Section
division
of the
here.
Daystrom,
Yeah.
division, yeah.
So yeah, interesting scene. So it's mostly abandoned. Here they're looking into this container where the remains of B4 have been.
I do notice. I did notice that this is that it's designed like a coffin from the roughly like a coffin from Star Trek. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I
So
thought that was an
B4, if you're not
interesting
familiar with Star Trek Nemesis, B4 was an android who looks pretty much exactly like Data. It was an earlier model of basically the Data type android built by Dr. Soong. But it didn't have a proper positronic brain network, whatever the term is for it. It did not have. It was a failed attempt to create, a sentient android, basically. So it had, it could talk and it could do some things, but it couldn't understand things to the degree that Data could. It didn't have his level of intelligence. It didn't have understanding of certain basic things. So anyway, somehow B4, here he is disassembled, and here at the Daystrom Institute. And so they go through this talk about how, nobody's been able to replicate what Dr. Soong did with Data, but Bruce Maddox tried. Now, if you're not familiar with Bruce Maddox, he appeared in one of the earlier episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation as a guy who wanted to take Commander Data and reverse engineer him and replicate him and basically equip every starship in the fleet with a Data. Because he viewed Data as property, he viewed Data as not a sentient being, but as basically equipment.
No. He viewed him at that time as that. I think that he felt. Oh, sorry, I might have misheard you.
At that time, that's what he thought.
At that time, that was he was thinking then. I think now he's not. That's not his motivation anymore. His motivation was to.
There's actually hints of there's actually hints of there's a later episode where Data reveals he's been corresponding with Dr. Maddox, so they carried on communication after this. But in that initial episode that I'm referring to, it's called The Measure of a Man, and it is one of the must-watch episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. If you're gonna, if you haven't seen Star Trek: The Next Generation and you want to get into it, or just watch a few episodes, that has to be one of the episodes you watch. It's because it's this whole episode centered around this tribunal that Starfleet does, where Picard basically has to defend the idea that Data is a person, not a piece of equipment. And in an interesting twist, they require Riker to do the opposite point of view. So Riker has to basically try and prove that his friend, Commander Data, is not a sentient being and is just a piece of equipment, and it's
And
very
I think
powerful.
this is something that's been lost on a lot of people today, is that if you can't sit down and formulate your opponent's, like, what they believe, then you're at a disadvantage. Because if you can't understand where they're coming from, you don't have to agree with them. You just have to understand where they're coming from. You have to understand their arguments, and that's what Riker was doing. He was understanding the arguments, and he was bringing the best counter arguments that he could, because in order for Data to survive this, he was going to need to counter those of the best arguments that Riker could bring. He had to end up countering them with a better argument, which is what ended up happening.
Plus, he was
And
threatened by the
yeah,
guy in
and he
charge, and
was
was like, "You
yeah,
better, if I feel like you're not doing your best at this, there's going to be some
yeah.
consequence." But yeah,
And I mean, this is yeah, this is how it's supposed to be, like, when it comes to, like, arguing this stuff and coming up with a response to this.
yeah.
So
So okay, here's where it got a little confusing because in Nemesis, or they talk about in this scene about how Data tried to transfer his consciousness or his neural net or whatever to like his memories and things into B4. He tried to do that, but B4's neural network was inferior and couldn't handle that, couldn't keep all that, and so basically Data was lost. But it's suggested here that then Bruce Maddox used something, what did they call it? Something cloning, neural cloning. Bruce Maddox had this idea that, and he doesn't show up in this episode, but they talk
yeah, no,
about it here.
yeah.
This idea that if they even had a
By the
single one
way,
of Data's neurons, they could clone or create an android from that.
no, 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 no. So quick thing on the event. He will not be played by the same person who played him originally. He's kind of like he's no longer acting, and he doesn't really look like himself anymore. Like like he's aged into a person. You know how old people can sometimes not really look like. Anyways, um, the theory is that, like DNA, and this is what a lot of people missed. And there's some people complaining about this. There's some horrendous reviews from fans who go, "This is so stupid. A neuron can't, like, possibly hold all of Data's, be the backbone of, like, all of Data." That's what a cell is. A positronic neuron in Data's brain is basically like a single cell of our body, which which in certain science, which in certain perspectives, especially in the Star Trek universe, humans can actually retain memory from their cells. So certain clones can actually have the memory of the of who they were before. That's Star Trek canon. The concept behind this, which has been misunderstood, is that if they can get that a single positronic neuron could possibly hold all of who Data was, and that is, so really what they're chasing, really what I think they're setting up here, and what I think that might end up happening is they might be able to, from Dahj, recreate Data, and that I think is the underlying plot. It's not just Picard saving Data's girls. And this is why I don't think Dahj is actually dead. Even if she is dead physically, theoretically, if because they're twins, you might be able to recreate Dahj from some of her sister's positronic, if she uses positronic neurons the same way that the Data does. That there's this possibility that they could recreate both of them with, like, up to date memory, because it's like that's how the neurons work. They're basically a DNA map for the whole brain, the whole mind, and the mind can transfer. Like Data's mind could transfer in and out. And there's that one episode where a dude copied himself into Data's brain and tried to take Data's body over, and then he transferred his brain out into a computer to save Data, and so stuff like that kind of sets the tone that they actually can just all they gotta do is get a thing that can hold data, and if they can get one of these positronic things, data can come back. That's the theory that a lot of people missed, because when they heard this thing in the thing, they just assumed, oh, so that's how they're making the clones. No, that's not how they're making the clones. It's part of how the clones are being made. But the holy grail here, to use that terminology, is that they can save data.
I think so.
And
Yeah, I think you're right that that's the direction where they'll go. But that when we're talking about just the dialogue in the show, they were talking about the process by which they made the clones. Fractal neuronic cloning. That's what the necklace symbol means.
mm-hmm.
And it always it results in two for some reason, and that's how they know that they have that Dahj has a twin sister.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
the
I think
thing is,
there's
they would have
more.
had to create. They had to have this fragment of data in order to create Dahj and her sister through this fractal neuronic cloning process. And so I guess where it gets, I mean, you've kind of explained it, I guess, but so some tiny piece of data must have remained in B4, and Maddox used that presumably to
Yeah, to,
then
to create
create.
the
Yeah,
create the clones. But I think now that they've gotten to this point where that was just his first test, and that he and I think Maddox, I think this is going to be a storyline. Maddox's story is going to be that he once opted for the, tearing data apart just to create more of him, and he didn't respect him as an individual, to the point now where his new life's goal has been to save data, and that his first attempt at trying to do so resulted in the twins, and that he has since disappeared, and that he's since become the new Dr. Soon, in that he's this reclusive scientist that's disappeared, and Soon's, his whole thing was he had disappeared to try and create data, and now Maddox has disappeared to try and save data. And this is the theory. This is the theory that I'm working with, and I, again, fingers crossed that the show is good, that it holds up, that it doesn't become trash at some point. Um, Here's hoping that we will get and be able to see and be able to have this as a good series, and not something that kind of starts out, which I think that the episode started out really really well, but hopefully we
yeah.
get more out of it. So
A little more to get through here, so let's just kind
yeah,
of power on. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about there. This is more of him talking to the doctor at the Daystrom Institute. Okay,
mm-hmm.
so then it's revealed. Okay, Dahj must have a twin sister. Then it cuts
Yeah,
to
it
this
cuts
dark,
to
foreboding place, and this Romulan dude.
this guy is the new Littlefinger. He is clearly somebody who knows about what's going on. He's maybe a plant. He's maybe the head of the organization. Maybe he's somebody who's fighting against this organization. Maybe he's maybe he turns out to be the good guy. Maybe he's this like anti-hero that we don't know if he's good or bad or whatever. But he's the new Littlefinger of TV. Like a whole bunch of people are making this reference, and I think it's an absolutely valid one. He is, you know, he's sneaky. You can tell that he knows more about what's going on. He's he knows things. He knows things. He knows things.
But you can tell
So
it's
yeah,
obvious he knows more than
yeah,
what was.
and yeah, okay, Littlefinger probably a stretch. He's the new kind of like Spockish type person, and Seven says in the chat, and I agree. He's obviously something new, and he's a little bit on the devious side. Maybe he's just smart. Maybe he's just we don't know yet. We're going to see. So
Yeah, I mean, he seems kind of conniving, but, in that sly, friendly kind of way. But anyway, so he's at this place called the Romulan reclamation site, which is this big um, base of some kind. And he meets Soji, Soji Asha, who is Dahj's sister, the other twin. And so, okay, here's random question, just kind of relating back to what we talked about. So, if they were created from this fractal cloning process from one of positronic neuron containing Data's sort of whatever data containing data, so do they have like an artificial positronic brain inside a flesh and blood body? Like if you X-rayed her, would you have like, yeah,
Well, and this is what I was saying is yeah, we know that they're made of flesh and blood ish, I would say strongly ish,
yeah,
but they clearly have something more to them, because either one of three things happened. I guess you could say one of four, but two of them are the same thing. Either Dahj's body was stolen by the Federation and was not reported to have been there, or it was stolen by these Romulans who were teleporting in and out, and they maybe beamed out her body once her defenses went down. Or, and those are kind of the two same answers, because it's like body taken, right? Or she's still alive and just badly damaged and managed to get away. Oh crap! I forgot the other. Oh, damn.
the other one I'm guessing would be that she was completely obliterated and is actually dead, or
Yeah,
maybe her
yeah,
body is still lying there and it's still cloaked.
yeah. So like I'm not sure which of these theories. God damn it! I can't believe it. So either her body's not there, she's still alive, or she was obliterated. I think that's what I was going for. I just had something else to
Yeah.
add to it.
Okay. Anyway, that was just kind
I
of a
lost it.
random tangent.
Yeah,
Like, I was
yeah.
curious what their brain looks like on the inside, because the way the dialogue, when I was watching the show, it almost sounded like Picard was asking, "Okay, can you create an android that's like fully biological?" Like it. That's where my brain went when he said the line. That's probably not what they were actually trying to go for. But anyway,
Yeah,
so here's the
I
other.
suspect that they're, as they showed in the beginning. I suspect that the clones are far more stronger than they think they are, and
Yeah.
that's just, I mean, that's just popular story writing right now. I mean, you look at you look at most of the really good like storylines right now, and it's always like somebody's more than what they are. Like that's the prevailing like popular writing tool currently being employed by a lot of stuff. So and it's a very it's popular because it's done well. You know, you have this in a whole bunch of other shows and movies and stuff like that going on right now, and it's been a prevailing thing for a little bit here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
All right. So so they have a little conversation, which
very
was
short.
this was one of the parts of the episode I felt was not well written. It was just kind of the dude starts sharing too much right off the bat, and it felt a little
Well,
forced.
she's a counselor, so I mean, I didn't find anything weird about that
Well,
at
still, it's
all.
like first introduction, and then he goes into this sob story, and she's like, well, anyway, whatever. It seemed a little awkward, but whatever.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And some people are hitting on that, and I agree. I agree that it is kind of weird, but you know, having done a lot of work with and a lot of investigation into psychiatrists. I mean, this is actually the next chapter that I'm writing in my book is titled the counselor. This is just something that happens. Some people, they meet a counselor, they immediately start oversharing, and or they clam up, and those are the two types of personalities you have when dealing with a counselor. Either somebody overshares or they clam up, and I think as a writing tool that's just how it is. There is no other like really third ways around it. When you're meeting a counselor who's going to be your counselor, who's going to be helping you, you either do one of those two things.
Well, except he was
That's it.
like, well, you hear sob stories all day. You don't want to hear another sad story. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
well,
felt it could have been written better, but anyway.
at his place, you're talking about the Romulan reclamation. Blah, 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 blah. You're talking about the place where every single Romulan has lost a lot of people that they knew,
Yeah.
a lot of people that they knew.
Yeah.
So some of them probably pretty much everybody. Some of them they've lost most of their family. They've lost their kids. They've lost their parents. They lost their significant other. They've lost everything that they've ever had, and that's why she's there, because she's there counseling these people. So makes sense to me. I don't see a logical hole in that at all.
Not logic. It's not a logical thing. It's just I felt like it could have sounded more natural. But anyway,
Yeah.
So where are they? This is the Romulan reclamation site, built into the remains of a Borg cube. So that was an interesting note to end the episode on.
Now, I need to add this here. So there's a lot of people who have seen this. A lot of them were like, "Way to spoil the ending! Way to spoil it! Way to spoil it!" I hate to be rain on somebody's parade, but this is one of the things that they have taken from the lore of the video game and from the lore from the all of the current lore that's available, both before and after the supernova. The Romulans have been and were experimenting with Borg technology. It's part of that is the theory as to why in the mirror universe, or in J.J. Abrams' universe, why they had that ship, why that ship was so dangerous, and you can see kind of some Borgish type elements from it. It turns out that that's kind of like what they had been doing, what they had been, the stuff that they had been designing, the stuff that they had been creating, was based off of Borg tech. This was the only thing, the only people who were surprised by this are people who have not been keeping up with Star Trek lore post the end of the current TV series going into the future. This is one of the primary plot points, and one of the things that was known for sure to make that transition was that the Romulans have been experimenting with Borg technology for a long time, and that they had gotten this, as we assume, the only reason why they have this technology right now, in this particular Borg cube right now, is because of the actions of Janeway in taking out the Queen in the core nexus of the Borg. That's the thought right now. That's the prevailing concept that's been there all along. So the only people who were shocked by this are people who have not been following Star Trek lore at all. Period. If you didn't know about this, then you haven't been keeping up with the theory, which isn't a bad thing. But it's just there's some critics who are saying this was totally was spoiler, just spoiled so much. It's like, we already knew that the Borg were going to play a big role in this stuff. Like, Hugh is back, 7 of 9 is back. They're both playing major roles. Obviously, the Borg is one of the best villains that they've ever had, and to just ignore their current status is really dumb. So yeah, of course this is gonna.
I don't see how this spoiled anything anyway. I mean, it's like, okay, I want to know more about this.
Yeah.
Plus, you have to consider, I mean, just Picard's history with the Borg. If it wasn't if the Borg weren't major players in this, that would be disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, saw an interesting theory about. So you've got the Romulans who are after these two androids, Dahj and her sister. The Romulans are operating out of an abandoned Borg cube. Picard was, turned into Locutus and had interactions with the Borg Queen. And then there's that scene in one of the movies where she's like, "Was that good for you?" There's some speculation out there. Are Dahj and Soji somehow partially also offspring of Picard? It's a weird theory. It's interesting. We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, the Romulans operating out of this Borg cube. So it's like, what the hell's going on there? Yeah. So overall, again, really enjoyed this. I do have some issues with it. I mean, if you nitpick, there's some logistical things if you nitpick, but yeah, overall, I'm giving this 4 laughing Picard heads out of 5. This first episode, really looking forward to the next episode. I've watched this first one twice, and I started watching it a third time without losing any enjoyment of it. So that's my take on it. So what are you giving this one, Saib?
I'm giving this 4 laughing Datas and 1 laughing Picard.
Well, I can't give you a laughing Picard in your line of Datas. What does that mean anyway? Out of how many total? Is a Picard head like half a Data head?
It's
we didn't really.
It's just a reference. It's just a reference. So
we didn't really figure this out.
4 laughing Datas. 4 laughing Datas out of 5. That's good. That's good enough for me. I think that overall, it has a lot of good potential. I'm still very, very, very concerned with the current showrunner. I'm very concerned with their lack of respect to the lore thus far. I really hope that they turn this around, because I really feel that this is, like, if this series bombs, and if the next 2 series, they're putting out Section 31, and they're putting out some animated comedy series as well. If 2 of these next 3 shows, including Picard, are bad, I mean, Discovery at this point, Discovery is just beyond saving. I don't know why they're bothering. It's just garbage. It's absolute garbage. Always has been garbage. Will probably continue to always be garbage. The whole premise is just wrong and stupid, and they need to move the hell on from it. They need to end that series with an explosion that takes it out and turns out that all of the events never happened. That's what they need to do with that. They just need to remove that whole thing from existence, because again, there's nothing that can save the current Discovery show. It just violates so much lore and the content and the writing, and it just needs to be removed from existence. Period. It's absolutely disgusting. I am very upset with it. Let's just leave it at that. So they've got to make the next 2 out of 3 shows good. If they don't, then this is probably going to end up killing Star Trek for a long time again, and we'll see another recession for years and years and years, and probably might not even see it come back around. I don't know. Disney has been working on some new sci-fi shows. They've had a lot of success with Mandalorian, so there is room for competitors to come in and take place of the new sci-fi stuff, and so that's potentially what's at stake here. So They better do this right, and they better not just treat the lore like it's inconsequential.
Yeah, I feel like they are trying to be respectful of the lore. It has definitely got the makings of potentially a very good show. Obviously, things can change. There's definitely room for them to go downhill, but this first episode I feel was solid. I feel like the focus on Picard's relationship with Data was really solid. I think that really is the heart of this show. It's the reason I kept watching, and it wasn't like they didn't just throw Data in for fan service, nostalgia.
And
I don't feel like this show is just trying to capitalize on nostalgia. I feel like it is appropriately using callbacks and throwbacks to carry the story forward X number of years after the fact. And really enjoyed this. Looking forward to the next episode, which will be airing on this coming Friday And on Friday afternoon, the same time, we will be doing our review of the second episode of Star Trek Picard. So, final thoughts, Sib?
No, that's it for me.
All right, thanks. Thank you so much, everybody.
They need to do this right.
Yeah.
They have to.
No,
They
absolutely
have to.
agree. I absolutely agree.
Because they've like there's a lot of fans. A lot of you guys in the comments have been upset with this series. I mean, with just the general direction with Alex Kurtzman leading this, I 100% agree with you. And they have to remedy this. They have to remedy this, or they will lose all of their fans, and it will be a permanent loss, and that's a sad thing. So they have got to get this right.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. If you're listening after the fact, please leave your comments down below. Don't forget to slam that like button if you appreciate this content. Yeah, it's just a little narrower of content than what we normally cover, but yeah, hope you're enjoying this, and we will see you next time. Talk to you later.